Welcome back. We'll get to the Cowboys in just a minute, but first, Browns and Bengals and Baker Mayfield finding Odell Beckham, snags it, drags his feet. That's a touchdown, boys.
For everybody that thought Odell Beckham Jr. fell off, maybe it's not Odell. Maybe it's just everything around him, because he's still capable of making plays like that.
Sensational, and his bad year was still a pretty damn good season.
Cowboys, Washington, Dak Prescott throwing it up to Michael Gallup, pulls it in, and that's 2 feet down, 1-2.
Hey, listen, man, Cowboys dangerous. Well, they play like this more. Oh, well, this season's over. Sorry, Alex. My bad.
Too little, too late.
Look at this.
Back to Saturday, Ohio State, Clemson, Buckeyes might have lost, but freshman Garrett Wilson climbing the ladder, making a nice grab.
If you're a Buckeye fan, this is one of the many drives in their field goal. I don't know how you get over a loss like this. You had 3 reviews. I think they all might have been called correctly, but they all went against you in the most horrifying fashion.
The tough one was the Raw's catch, no catch, which resulted in a fumble that was scooped and scored. That's a tough call.
Or the sack that ends up not being a sack, it's a first down, and one of your better players gets kicked out of the game. It's a great win by Clemson, a brutal loss for Ohio State.
All right, moving on to the Dallas Cowboys now, and their needs and their wants. Dallas needed a win and an Eagles loss if they wanted to get to the postseason. They got the win routing Washington. They didn't get an Eagles loss as Philly pulled away from the Giants to win the NFC East. Eagles are moving on. Cowboys are going home, leaving Jerry Jones to answer many questions about the future of his franchise, most notably about his head coach, Jason Garrett.
Out of respect to Garrett, would you kind of make a quick decision just so he won't be twisting to a certain extent?
Again, I'm not going to comment on anything to do about those kinds. Just say I really know that that's the order of things and what we want to hear and talk about. If I've got anything to say substance tonight, other than my disappointment about not being in the playoffs, but I'm not going to get into that out of respect for everybody.
How much do you want to be the coach here in 2020?
Yeah, I want to be the coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but we'll see what happens.
Do you think you will be the coach of the Cowboys?
I have no idea.
All right, Nick, is Jason Garrett, though, responsible for the Cowboys not making the playoffs, for everything that happened to this team this season?
He's not solely responsible. If we're doing a pie chart, he does not have the majority of it, but he's got the biggest piece of it. And when you look at the Cowboys and you look at their numbers, not just the eye test of talent, but their point differential. Their point differential this year was plus 113. That is elite. The only teams better than that this year: Baltimore, New England, San Francisco, Kansas City, New Orleans. What most people think are the 5 best teams in football, maybe with Green Bay sprinkled in. Every team, 11 teams in the NFL had a point differential, meaning they outscored their opponents on the season by more than 30 points. 30. 10 of them are in the playoffs. The 11th is the Dallas Cowboys, and they, again, were top 6. That is coaching. It's not just coaching, but the inability to beat good teams, which they could not do all year, the inability to win close games. They were, what, 0-7 in games decided by less than 10 points? That is coaching, not exclusively, but partially. And once again, for the 4th time in Jason Garrett's career, it wasn't this week, but last week, you had a win and you're in game in week 16 or 17 against a divisional opponent, and for the 4th time in those 4 opportunities, they lost. So Jason Garrett's fate, to me, was sealed a month ago when Jerry Jones put him on notice after the Patriot game saying, Jason will be coaching in the league next year, but didn't say where. And then they fell flat against Detroit, and they fell flat against Buffalo, and they fell flat against Philadelphia. But yeah, the 45%, 50% of the Cowboys' failures have to go on Jason Garrett. His contract's expiring, and his time in Dallas is over.
Well, you're talking about Jerry Jones putting Jason Garrett on notice a month ago. I mean, Jason Garrett came into this season on notice because Jerry Jones wouldn't give him a contract extension. There's a reason why NFL teams don't allow coaches to be lame ducks going into a year. Just because you want the players in the locker room to respect the head coach's authority. But if you're a guy in that locker room, if you're DeMarcus Lawrence or if you're Ezekiel Elliott, you have more job security than your head coach does. And that does something to a team's mentality. So we're trying to figure out why Jason Garrett couldn't get this team to turn on the light switch, why he couldn't get this group going. One of the rosters that we said was the most talented coming into 2019. a big part of it has to do with Jerry Jones not giving Jason Garrett the job security. So while Nick puts a lot of the blame of this season on Jason Garrett, I go back to Jerry Jones' decision this offseason not to extend Jason Garrett. We all understand that Jerry wants to compete for a championship, and he finally feels like he has a team that's capable of doing that. But you do have to empower your head coach, and Jerry Jones failed to do that. So that's why I put a lot of the failure of this year on the owner. The only problem is you can't fire Jerry Jones.
Cannot fire
He's
Jerry
going to be there. So I think the next to take the blame has to be Jason Garrett. He won't be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys in 2020.
Look, the good thing about this team is that it's basically intact. They've got a good team for all intents and purposes. They're very talented. You're probably going to have your quarterback. You've already paid your running back. You got a great wide receiver. Your defense is a little banged up, but you got your great defense. So when you're looking at filling that position, what type of head coach are you looking for when you know the relationship with the owner and you know what kind of team you already have?
I do not think the Cowboys can afford the risk of an unproven college coach. I think that the risk versus reward on that is it's out of whack. They are not rebuilding. They cannot have a year of growing pains where you figure some things out, you show some good things, and it's like, all right, it's about 2021 now. It is win right now. Win now mode for the Cowboys, honestly, started the year following 2016. They didn't know they were in win now mode in Dak's rookie year. But when you go 13-3, when you have the rushing champ and Zeke Elliott, they were in we can compete for a Super Bowl right now from 2017 forward. 17, they missed the playoffs, go 9-7 after Zeke's suspension. Last year, they start horribly, rally down the stretch, win one playoff game, but they were never a Super Bowl threat. This year, they were never a Super Bowl threat because their inability to win close games. They on the average Cowboys game this year, they outscored their opponent by 7 points, and they outgained their opponent by 100 yards, and they finished 8-8. What you need is a professional, seasoned head coach. So people are going to say Ron Rivera, but Ron Rivera might get hired before the end of today's show with Washington. I'm going to say a name that a lot of people aren't mentioning. Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier, who made the playoffs with Christian Ponder as his quarterback in Minnesota, they had a short trigger with him, as they often do with certain coaches in this league. He's done a great job as the defensive coordinator in Minnesota, would bring a toughness and a professionalism to the Cowboys I think they need. I think the Matt Rule, who people don't know him, the head coach of Baylor, those guys, I'm not saying he wouldn't be a good head coach. I'm not saying Lincoln Riley wouldn't be a good NFL head coach. But if they're a disaster, by the time you can recover from that, Zeke's done. Like, how long you're on a totally new team, so I want a known quantity as a head coach. And if he's a defensive-minded coach, to me, that's all the more of a bonus because it's a switch from what they have now.
No, you're right. Once teams go through a coaching change, they usually go in the opposite direction of what they've already had. Jason Garrett, an offensive mind, they're probably going to lean toward the defensive side of the ball. But I'm with you in terms of not taking a chance on a college coach. You don't need a question mark at your head coach position when you have championship aspirations. But I don't think that the Cowboys can stay the course either. You can't go status quo and run this thing back with Jason Garrett. That's just not an option. You've had this guy there for the decade. He's had 9 full seasons. He took over with, I think, 8 games left in 2010 as the interim head coach after they moved on from Wade. But, I mean, in looking at Jason Garrett, it just has not been good enough. 85-67 is the record, but you've only got 3 playoff berths, 2 playoff wins. They're going to have to improve on that. This team is trying to get to the next level. I don't think Jason Garrett can take them there. I do think they need to find a coach that has NFL experience in that role as a head coach in order to put this team in the best position to try to compete in 2020.
But quickly, you don't think Jerry Jones wants to bring in a name? He's a splashy owner. You don't think the reason he had Urban in his box, the reason there's
then let me throw a name at you.
With Lincoln.
Let me throw a name at you that checks the box of experience, not going offense to defense, though. What about offering Josh McDaniels $10 million a year? What about just saying, Josh McDaniels, you know what, come here. Belichick's going to coach there forever. You almost went to Indy. Josh McDaniels has the experience, obviously has learned from the greatest coach of all time. That maybe is a way to thread the needle of. That is a name, but it also has some experience to it. That's a name I'd be on the lookout for as well.
The only thing with Josh McDaniels is you have to wonder whether he'd be cool with Jerry Jones being the general manager. Because if he's learned anything from Bill Belichick in his first tenure as a head coach with the Denver Broncos, it's probably in my best interest if I have control over the roster. I don't know if Josh McDaniels is going to sign up for that. He'll have other opportunities where he can have more control within the organization, but As far as Jason
Garrett, $10 million a year is $10 million.
$10 million a year is $10 million a year, but you do want to put yourself in the best chance to succeed, because if he becomes a head coach for the second time and it doesn't work out, chances are it won't be a third. But with Jason Garrett, the 3 losses that they're going to lament from this season, the loss to the New York Jets, the loss to the Buffalo Bills at home Thanksgiving, and then the loss the week after in Chicago. Those are 3 games that the Dallas Cowboys had no business losing. It's going to cost Jason Garrett his job.
All right, time now for Putting Red on It, sponsored by CarMax. As for the Eagles.